Welcome everyone to the Thursday edition of our Packers News live chat. Alongside Tom Silverstein, I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers hit the field today for their most intense practice of the week, gearing up for their game against the Indianapolis Colts this weekend. We'll take a look at who practiced today, who didn't practice today, plus we'll also preview the matchup between the Packers offense and the Colts defense. Before we get into that, as always, you know the drill. You can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. Tom and I want to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. Packers fans, I'll give you your shot first. Wide receiver Davante Adams, who's dealing with an ankle injury, did not practice today. Now I'll give you your chaser. Wide receiver Allen Lazard, who recently came off of injured reserve with a core injury, did practice today. It was his second consecutive day of practicing. Lazard, in case you forgot, hasn't played a game since week 3 against the New Orleans Saints. That was one of the best games of his career. He had 6 receptions for 146 yards and a touchdown. How desperately do the Packers need to see Lazard back this weekend in advance of their game against the Colts and their number 4 scoring defense?
Well, I would say it's all dependent on Davante Adams' status. If Davante Adams can't play, they need Lazard back. Now, how much he's going to be able to give in his first game back, I don't know. And I can't tell you for certain that this will be his first game back. He's active. He's on the 53-man roster. But that doesn't mean they have to play him. He apparently had some soreness last week, and that's why they didn't activate him. So he's going to have to work through this injury. It's a significant injury, and wide receivers don't come back real quickly from it. And I believe this will be, about 8 weeks since he's had that surgery, maybe 7. And, he's not going to be a savior when he gets out there. But if they could get both Adams and Lazard out there, that might help.
In COVID-19 related news, inside linebacker Chris Barnes returned to practice today, not to actually practice. However, he was working with the rehab group. It is his first time in 2 weeks that he has been in the facility and able to do any sort of activity since he was placed on COVID-19 reserve. When Chris Barnes is finally able to get back into the swing of things, he is going to be in a room with a healthy Christian Kirksey and Kamal Martin. What will Barnes' role look like when he is finally healthy enough to play?
I think it'll be exactly what it should have been in week 1, which is that he'll be a special teams player and a backup. Kamal Martin and Christian Kirksey are the starters, hands down. And Kirksey's too experienced not to be in the lineup, and Martin has way too much potential not to be on the field. So who knows if those guys can stay healthy. They've both been hurt. But as long as they're healthy, they'll be on the field, and Barnes will take a backup role and try to do something on special teams.
Let's take a look at this Colts defense. In the Packers' tenure under head coach Matt LaFleur, they are 4-2 against defenses in the top 10 of the league. That would include the 49ers back in 2019 and the 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Those two losses came against the 49ers last year and the Bucs this year. This Sunday will mark the Packers' first time going up against a number 1 defense. What makes this Colts defense so much different from the 2019 49ers and the 2020 Bucs?
Well, I don't think they're that far from the 49ers. I think there's some similarities, including DeForest Buckner, the defensive tackle, who pretty much blew them up twice last year. He was with the 49ers and got traded to the Colts. It starts there with their front 4. They don't have to blitz a lot. They get pressure with the quarterback. They have speed in the middle. Darius Leonard's a rising star inside linebacker. They have good active corners and young but good safeties. So really, I think they're not like Tampa where they're going to just run you over, blitz you into submission, but they are going to get some pressure on you, and they're going to force you to beat them either running the ball or trying to throw it deep.
In the words of wide receiver Davante Adams, there is no defense out there that is godly. Every defense has their flaws, and the Colts are no exception. They're 17th in the league on third down, and they're only 19th in the red zone. How can the Packers exploit the Colts' defenses this Sunday? Weaknesses, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, they have to run the ball. They have to figure out a way to get Aaron Jones going early. And once they do that and they can get those linebackers committing to the run, then there's going to be some openings in the middle of the field and, the boundaries. They may not be able to get it all the way down the field, but they will be able to do a lot of play action that allows a guy like Valdez-Scantling to cross the field or Tanyan to cross the field. I think that's ideally what they want to do, and then eventually get Indianapolis to feel like they got to bring a safety down to help against the run. So I think Aaron Jones early and often.
Let's take some questions over on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube now. Thank you all so much for joining us. It is wonderful to see you all. Let's start with Nick. Nick says, Colts quarterback Phillip Rivers is great at getting the ball out quickly. You think this would be a time that defensive coordinator Mike Pettin would blitz a little bit more to get after him faster? Rivers is not exactly the most mobile. However, he is very good at getting the ball out quickly. How does Mike Pettin attack a quarterback like Rivers that has great protection in front of him in his offensive line?
Yeah, it's actually the opposite. When you've got a guy who's getting rid of the ball so quickly, you don't want to blitz a ton, because he is gonna find the safe receiver, the guy who's or the hot receiver, the guy who's been left open. You need to pick and choose your blitzes, but to go full out on it, no, you can't do that. I mean, I think Tampa Bay figured that out after they got crushed by New Orleans. So with a guy like Rivers, you do need to get in his face, but you don't want to over blitz, because if he's getting it out quickly, then you just want to rally to the ball and keep it in front of you.
Thank you, Nick, for your thought. We appreciate you joining us. Let's take a question here from Bernard, the golden question about injuries. We always love to see what we can do here with injury questions. Bernard wants to know, are cornerbacks Kevin King and Jaire Alexander playing this week? King is dealing with a quad injury. He has missed the last 5 games with this quad injury. Jaire Alexander has been dealing with a concussion. He has missed the last game and a half now with this concussion. However, both of them are practicing, both of them, believe it or not, in a full capacity. For the first time, both Kevin King and Jaire Alexander practiced today in pads in a full capacity. How likely is it that they are healthy and ready to go against the Colts?
Yeah, I expect them to start. I expect them to be ready, start, play the entire game. I don't think there's any limitations on either of them. Alexander still has to, at least as far as we know, he still has to finish the concussion protocol. But the fact that he practiced in pads today is just an indication that he's fine. And so, yeah, this will be the first time they've had those two guys together. And that goes a long way in helping Pettin. There's situations where he can load the box against the run, or he can blitz, because he knows the two guys outside can cover man to man. And so it gives him so many more options when he knows Kevin King is there and can handle, a T.Y. Hilton or a Michael Pittman.
Thank you, Bernard, for your question and for joining us as always. Brian over on Facebook wants to know, if the Packers win this one, is this the last quote-unquote measuring stick game, or will Packers fans not know who this team really is until January or February? The Colts present the biggest challenge perhaps of their last stretch of games, seeing as they're going up against teams like the Bears twice over the last 6 games, and seeing the Lions once again. They'll also be facing off against the Titans. How do the Packers approach this game compared to some of the others?
Yeah, this is a good measuring stick. I really think it is. I think they do need to show that they can beat a really good, hot team, and that's what the Colts are. Now, the Colts are not a dominating team. the teams that they've beaten are not very good for the most part. So it's not the end all to lose or beat the Colts, but it's a good statement if you can go up against the number one defense in the league currently and put up some points. Now, I still think Chicago may not be an elite team. They may not even be a playoff team, but they're a rivalry team, and you can consider that a big game because you gotta not only deal with their defense, which can be really, really good, but there's just so much emotion involved. It's almost like a playoff game. And then I think Tennessee, they might have their act together by the time they play. They're definitely a talented team. So there's some tests in front of them, but this is a good start.
Thanks, Brian, for your question. Josh, we'll flip it over to you on Facebook. Josh asks, who do the Packers cut to get money to sign players next year? I'm glad we have our resident capologist here, Mr. Tom Silverstein. He just wrote a great story over on PackersNews.com explaining more about the numbers behind left tackle David Bakhtiari's contract extension. I highly recommend it. Tom, what is the Packers' current cap situation with the extensions that they've made considered going into 2021 when the cap is expected to be much lower than anticipated?
Yeah, so the Bakhtiari deal was actually very cap friendly for this year and next year, which was done on purpose because they know next year the cap's not going to be as high as it was this year. It's going to be, almost, it could be $23 million less. The minimum they're saying will be 175, and it was 198.2 this year. So what are they going to have to do? Right now, with just the players that they have signed, they're about I think it's 16 million over, and they're going to have to make some moves. They could cut about, I think it was about 10 million with cutting like Dean Lowry, and maybe Josh Jackson or a couple other guys that are suddenly not striking my memory. But there are, then they can make some drastic moves if they absolutely have to. They could cut a Preston Smith and gain $8 million. They could cut Christian Kirksey and gain $6 million. Devin Funchess, who didn't play this year, they could get $2.25 million from him. So there's some trimming they'll probably have to do after they sign Jones, and I think they will sign Jones. So it's, and then finally they can readjust Rodgers' contract again if they want to.
We'll stick along this note of discussing 2021 free agency, the Packers cap situation next season. Matthew, we already answered the first half of your question. Will Allen Lazard be at full strength? To be determined. We'll see how he practices tomorrow. Matthew also wants to know, will running back Aaron Jones be re-signed next? Aaron Jones is perhaps next on the list of 2021 free agents that the Packers must get to. Cornerback Kevin King and center Corey Linsley are also on that list. How likely is it that the Packers extend Aaron Jones?
I think it's likely. They got to get going, though, because what they're going to want to do is if they do a 4-year deal with him and they sign it before the deadline for using 2020 as part of the cap hit, then they got to get that going pretty soon. And that's pretty important because that you can use what you have here. You can spread the signing bonus out for 5 years instead of 4 years, and it'll help them next year. So if they're going to do it, they need to do it pretty soon. And I think they will. I just don't, I don't know if Jones is going to get the numbers he wants, but they definitely gave Bakhtiari the numbers he wanted. And Kenny Clark got pretty good numbers too.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for your question and for joining us as always. We have a number of suggestions from our chat here, Tom, of potential cap casualties that the Packers could have next season. One of them I see as a popular name in here, Preston Smith, outside linebacker Preston Smith, who only has a sack and a half this season. Where does he fit into the Packers' plans in the future?
Well, he's got to pick it up the second half of the year. I mean, he's being paid a lot of money to get after the quarterback and play the run, and I think it's been kind of disappointing. He hasn't been terrible, but I think you're expecting more from him than what he's given, and so I'll be watching closely to see how his second half goes. And you know, I think you don't want to get rid of a guy who's had 12 sacks or 11 and a half sacks or whatever it was. But, if you get into a drastic situation, that is an option, yes.
Thank you, Southwest Florida Packers fan club, for your question. Felt a little bit like Southwest Florida today here. 50 degrees, nice and warm in Green Bay. Chico over on Facebook says, how the heck are the Packers going to stop Philip Rivers and they couldn't stop the Jaguars quarterback backup Jake Luton? Every game is different. The Packers are going to have a different game plan going into every single game. However, when you look at close wins that the Packers have had this season against a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they kind of barely squeaked one out, 4 points over the Jacksonville Jaguars and a backup quarterback, one of the worst teams in the league, how does that project onto their outlook against a team like the Indianapolis Colts?
Well, first of all, they did stop the Jacksonville quarterback, and they did it, at the end of the game when they really needed to do it. And, not all the points were given up by the defense. The defense played well enough to win. The offense is the one that really did not, or really came up short in that game. So, yeah, Philip Rivers is going to be tough. They're going to have to, figure out a way to put some pressure on him. And then you've got to be tight to his receivers, and you've got to try to get him to force the ball into coverage. I mean, he's got 7 interceptions. So, he's prone to interceptions. You've got to pick him off at least twice. I think that's going to be necessary for them to win the game. If you get enough pressure, or play some stuff that you don't usually play and he's not used to it, you got a chance.
Thank you so much for your question, Chico. We appreciate it. Jason has an interesting question. I don't think we've really we haven't gotten into this topic too much. Jason noticed that quarterback Aaron Rodgers is no longer part of the NFLPA representatives for the Packers. Is there an explanation as to why he chose to step down, other than Rodgers stating it's not what he wants to do at this point in his career? Kicker Mason Crosby is going to be the Packers' lead representative for their team, and they have a number of other representatives among the team as well. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers has held that position in the past. Why did he decide to not either run for re-election among his teammates or simply just not be a part of it this season?
Well, he wasn't a big fan of the CBA and how it came together last year. And a lot of veterans, especially the higher paid guys, were not thrilled about the collective bargaining agreement. I'll bet they're a little happier now seeing what they're seeing with the coronavirus, because they're getting all the raises that they negotiated in that contract that they might not have gotten if they had not signed that deal and were still negotiating. So it wasn't a great deal, and Rodgers to some degree has a point, but I didn't ever feel that he was wholeheartedly into it. I know when Jordy Nelson did it, he seemed to be really engaged in it. I remember having some really interesting discussions with him about the CBA and negotiations. Rodgers, I think, was trying to add his name to the bargaining team to add some juice, and he did. And I think now he's passing it on to someone else.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason, for your question. And thank all of you so much for joining us. It was wonderful chatting with all of you. We will be back once again to wrap up tomorrow's practice, plus do our final preview of Sunday's game against the Indianapolis Colts. So if we did not get to your question today, don't worry about it. Come back tomorrow. We will be with you once again, me and Jim Ozarski. So make sure you come back over here. For Tom Silverstein, I am Olivia Reiner. We will see you next time.